It was his first snowfall of the year. It was nice, fresh, and crisp on the ground. It had just fallen overnight. Good 4, maybe 5 inches or so. Nothing like a fresh winter snow. Having grown up in a warmer part of the country, looked forward to it every single winter. I looked forward to the holiday season, but I also looked forward to the change in the seasons, the cooling off, the drying of the air, the snowfall, wintertime. There was just something so deep and primal about wintertime that just resonated so deeply within me. It just seemed so wondrous and so surreal, unreal. I didn't really know what to make of it, but everything just seemed so at ease and peaceful. I'd always looked forward to it every single year. The evergreen trees covered in snow. Almost every single year in early December, I would rent myself a cabin and go up to Colorado and spend a week or so. Just admiring the landscape, admiring the winter. This time around, I took a couple friends along with me, Dawn and Pat. It had been a long year for all three of us, and we were eager to make our way up to Old Mile High. So we bought some plane tickets and rented a place for a week, and we made our way up. To celebrate the occasion, we got ourselves a case of Coors Lights and plan to have some fun. The day we got there, we visited the ski resort that was just next door, and skied and snowboarded for a bit. And once it started to get dark, we went back to the cabin that was next door. Pat was hell-bent on calling a couple Venezuelan ladies they met down in Miami, and Don was kind of thinking of entertaining a little lady he knew back home himself. Myself, I was just here for the getaway alone. Just here for the scenery, the nature, the wildlife, the mountains, the trees. Anything that would tickle a nature nut's fury. Nature nut's fancy, rather. So as it got late, we were in the living room, drinking some brew. We heard something. Weird. Heard something strange. Pat's ears perked up. Don and I looked at him, and he raised his hand suddenly. Do you guys hear that? He mouthed silently. I shook my head. I couldn't hear anything at first, but I kept listening. I could somewhat make it out. It was very, very, very subtle footsteps. Very small crunch in the snow. They would happen every so often. A 1-2 pattern. Bipedal. You've got company, Don whispered. Pat shook his head in confusion. I don't think so, he whispered. The snow had really begun to downpour heavily now, and it wouldn't really be wise to be out hiking in these conditions, let alone around someone's cabin at night, this hour at night. We continued to listen. Then nothing. We stood there, sat there silently for about 10 minutes, and we headed out. All three of us grabbed a flashlight and we took a look outside. We couldn't see anything. The snow was still flurrying down, and we couldn't see anything at all. Searched on the brush and the trees, and there's no sign of anything. No footprints, no indentations in the ground, nothing. Sound was in earshot, and yet there was still nothing. We searched for a little while longer, and we turned in again for the night. Went to bed around 11 o'clock, and right before I dozed off, I began to hear tapping against the cabin wall, outside cabin wall. Distinct 1, 2, 3 pattern. Sequence of 3 taps. Then I began to hear something sharp against the exterior of the cabin wall, being dragged. Kind of like nails or claws of some sort. Though I couldn't differentiate what. I stood there. I laid there, frozen in my bed. The hell was that? I thought to myself. I looked over at Dawn and Pat, who were in separate beds, and they were looking over at the wall, still awake as well. What the fuck? I mouthed silently at them. They shrugged their shoulders. Heard the tapping sound once more. Don violently shook his head back and forth, his eyes wide open, bugged out by what was happening. Pat just stood there laid there silently, pale as a ghost and not being able to say a thing. For a guy that was so boastful about the 2 Venezuelan babes that he was biting up, and so macho and machismo, he was just a shell of his former self. Just laying there, motionless, silent, not saying a thing. Then we heard a low growl outside the cabin. The beast was massive. I'd been to the zoo and I've been on safaris a couple times. Been to some of the most wild places on Earth. Heard Nile crocodiles and saltwater crocodiles bellowing. Heard bison bellowing. I've heard a lion roar and growl. I've heard a tiger roar and growl. heard bears grunt and roar and growl. This was unlike anything I'd ever heard or experienced before. When it growled, it was almost like my insides jingled and rattled and vibrated. It wasn't loud, but it was very intense, low, bassy. Yawn. They both just cowered there. The tapping continued. And once again, I heard the nails and claws drag against the wall of the cabin. Then I began to hear a sniffing sound. A snort and a sniff. A snort and another low rumbling growl. I could almost swore that I almost hear almost a laugh at the end of the low growl. It sounded like a laugh. A violent hit against the outside of the cabin. I almost jumped out of my skin. I jumped up out of my bed. I looked over at Pat and Dawn, and they both shook their head. Another violent hit. Then a growl. They knew we were there. Could smell us from outside somehow. Then I remembered. There was an old rifle right above the fireplace. I had no idea if it was still functional or workable, but... Oh yes, it was. Okay. It was only a 30-06, but it's better than nothing. Wherever this thing is, it's probably too big to be taken down with that, but you never know. So I motioned for Pat and Dawn to get up out of the beds. They resisted at first, but eventually they came. Then we hear a motion. A thud. One huge heavy thud against the roof of the cabin. Jesus, now it's on top of us, I thought to myself. I slowly got the rifle. Checked one of the cabinet where the caretaker said the rounds were, and I loaded my weapon. Right. Who's ever up there better get. I'm armed and I will shoot, I shouted. A deep growl from above us. Listen, I don't know what the fuck you are, but you better leave right fucking now, I shouted once again. 1, I shouted. 2, I shouted. Before I yelled 3. Heard an impact in the snow outside, the crunch. Then it was gone. Whatever it was, it understood what I was communicating to it somehow, and ran off. Probably figured that we weren't worth the trouble and figured it might find an easier meal elsewhere or something. I don't know. Maybe it was just screwing with us for fun. Who knows? I turned to Pat and Don. What do you boys think? Pat shrugged. Don shook his head and said, I have no idea what the hell that was. I mean, I've heard stories about Sasquatch, but... what the hell? Rob, what the hell was that? I don't know. I don't think Sasquatch has claws like that, but... well, I hate asking both of you this, but... we'll wait a while and we'll... would you guys want to go outside and look after a little bit? Fuck no! Yelled Pat. You guys are fucking crazy going out to look for that thing. What the hell's wrong with you guys? Don't you guys realize what the fuck we just experienced? I nodded. Yeah, but I'm armed. We don't know how big that thing is, Rob. We don't know what the fuck that thing is. We don't know what it's capable of, what it can do. I know. But I need to have a look. I need to have a look. So I got the flashlight. Went back outside. Don accompanied me, but Pat stood by the threshold of the doorway and watched as we searched outside. Even though we heard the impact against the snow and the whatever it was run away, there were no tracks. Hell, there weren't even scratches against the wall of the log cabin, or splintered wood, where whatever it was hit it, struck the cabin. No damaged wood, no scratches, no nothing. We went back inside. Whatever it was, it never returned. The weekend progressed and turned into the week. Two little Venezuelan honeys that had invited up were quite tickled in the hot tub when I told them about how Pat and Don reacted to Pat's machismo when the whatever it was harassed us that one night. Diego laughed her ass off, and Leona, well, she kind of sat there and snickered, giving me the eye. Anywho, the week kept on going. We skied some more, we hiked, had some fun with the ladies, and right before we were scheduled to go back home, we packing all of our stuff up. The guys were still inside, and I wandered out just beyond the cabin, looking around, just enjoying the woods. I was enjoying myself until I turned slightly, and there was an immense pressure on my throat. I turned to look, and I was in the grasp of this massive hand. This thing. This black, hairy thing. It had these long claws and these massive black hands, this black fur, hair. Looked into its eyes, and Its face, it was almost like a cross between a human and a gorilla, but had these incredible incisors, similar to a crocodile or a shark. It smiled at me. Its demonic, evil hazel eyes staring right into my soul. It had just enough pressure on my throat not to choke me outright, but enough to keep me in place and keep me from screaming. It smiled deviously. Saliva dripped from its teeth. Its tongue caressed its teeth and lips as its mouth watered at the prospect of devouring me right then and there. The grasp tightened. I wheezed. The pressure increased. My blood rushed to my head. My eyes began to feel like they were going to pop out of my head, and Hey! I shouted. Then a gunshot. I was released immediately and thrown to the ground. There's a scream and a roar, then another gunshot. Blacked out for a few seconds, and I shook my head. Yeah, you better run, you motherfucker! Shouted Don, releasing another round. Another roar. Don, Pat, Diego, and Leona came out of the cabin, rushing towards me. Guys, did you see the size of that thing? Don shouted. All of them nodded their heads in amazement. The thing had to be 10 fucking feet tall. Or bigger. The fuck is something like that running around the woods? That thing can eat people. No wonder so many people go missing around here. From time to time. Don, do you think that was a... He nodded. He said, yeah, Pat, I think that was one, but I've never heard of one like that before. That looked like it looked like a type of one, but must have been something else completely. It's weird. Don, I could have sworn that you hit it, but I don't see any blood. Where's the blood? We searched around for some blood, but we couldn't find any. Especially where the impact and where Don shot it. Continued looking, and there was one large, lonely footprint, around 21 inches long, gorged deep within the snow. Of all the times I would come back to the cabin year after year, that was the only time I encountered it directly. Sometimes late at night, I can vaguely hear the grunting and the growling, the crunching of the snow beneath the giant's feet. Only to see nothing but blackness in the winter night.